Hello students, today I am going to discuss a great metaphysical poem, Love. Love is a religious poem composed by George Herbert, who is one of the first and greatest of the metaphysical poets. Herbert has full faith in God and believes that a man should dedicate his life to God's service. He was no Puritan, but valued the beauty and neatness of the church in which he officiated. He was an intelligent, sagacious, and penetrating observer of himself and others. He liked simple, homely, racy language. He is in fact the saint of the metaphysical school. The poem Love gives expression to Herbert's own spiritual experience and the conflicts he underwent. Now, I come to the text. Please concentrate on the text. Love bade me welcome, yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack, from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. So here the poem opens in a conversational mode. Love has been identified with God, and there goes a talk or conversation between God and the poet. God is welcoming the poet, and the poet is his guest. Though God welcomes the poet, yet the poet is reluctant to go near God. The poet is hesitating because he feels that he has done so many sins in his life. So his soul does not move ahead. The poet is guiltily conscious of dust and sin. The moment the poet hesitated, God at once read his hesitancy, and he observed the poet growing slack in entering. There came near the poet and asked sweetly. God asked softly to poet if he lacked anything. What was the reason that he was not moving ahead? What was the reason why he was lacking the courage to move forward? So in the first stanza we find that God at once recognizes the hesitancy of the poet and talks to him softly and invites once again to come near him. Then the poet answered. Now come to the second stanza. A guest, I answered, worthy to be here. Love said, you shall be he. I, the unkind, ungrateful, oh, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Love took my hand, and smiling did reply, who made the eyes but I? So in the second stanza, the poet replies that he doesn't deserve to be there. He is a guest who doesn't deserve or is worthy to go near God. But love replied patiently, love replied happily that don't think in that way. Then the poet feels his guilt more and more, and he says that he is unkind and ungrateful to God. The poet is conscious of his guilt. He confesses that he has been cruel and ungrateful to God. He cannot even look at him. Then God takes his hand into his own hand and replied smilingly that who had made your eyes? So the creator of your eyes, which has committed fault, which has committed sin, it is not your fault. It is the fault of God. It is my fault, God says, because I have created those eyes which have done so many mistakes. So in the last stanza, the conversation goes on, and the poet once again reiterates his point. Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve. And know you not, says love, who bore the blame? My dear, then I will serve. You must sit down, says love, and taste my meat. So I did sit and ate. The conversation moves forward, and the poet is so much feeling guilty that he says that he has misused his eyes. He has not fulfilled the purpose of eyes given to him. Then he still hesitates to move forward to God. Then God says that it is not the poet who is to be blamed, rather it is he himself who is to be blamed, because he has created God. So there is no shame in looking at him. Then the poet tells of his other sin and guilt. He says that he has misused his eyes, but God takes the blame on himself because he has created him. And as such, the invitation is accepted. The poet has his communion with God. And the moment man meets God, or the soul meets the eternal soul, the purpose of a religious person is fulfilled. The meeting of or union of man with God is the purpose of a religious person. So in the whole poem, we find that George Herbert appears to be out and out a religious poet. Once again, in a nutshell, I am going to tell about the appreciation of the poem. In this poem, the poet is reluctant, guiltily conscious of dust and sin, to become a guest of God. You know, the word love has been identified with God. The poem reflects the poet's deep sense of sorrow before God for his earthly sins and the Christian spirit of God's forgiveness of man's confession. You know, love has been the representative of God. The poet describes his sense of guilt. Aware of his own misdeeds in the worldly life, he is hesitant to see God, who, however, comforts him. God has invited him, but he has no courage to face God. He feels that he is a dirty and filthy soul. He does not deserve to be a guest at his house. But God consoles him, saying that he is a worthy person. The poet confesses that he has been very cruel and ungrateful to him. He cannot even look at him. God takes his hand smilingly and tells him that it is he who has made his eyes. So there is no shame in looking at him. Then the poet tells of his other sin and guilt. He says that he has misused his eyes, but God takes the blame on himself because he has created him, and as such, the invitation is accepted. And the moment the invitation is accepted, the poet has his communion with God. It is thus clear that God does not put much importance to man's guilt. He loves all his creations, however sinful they are. We find Herbert's staunch faith in and ultimate submission to God. The dramatic pattern or the use of conversational idioms makes the poem telling in effect. The effective use of monosyllables in this poem implies hesitancy and pause. In fact, George Herbert is perhaps the only poet who talks to God face to face. Thank you.